Hello, everybody. My name is Maria Suleiman, and welcome to AMA LTL. I will be presenting today on the topic transitioning from manager to leader. Just wanted to do a quick tech check. If you can hear me, please raise your hand or type yes in the question box. We have a huge group today. We have almost 100 people on the webinar, so I just want to make sure that everybody can hear me and everybody can. Okay, I see hands being raised. Also, can you see my screen? All right, awesome, awesome. I'm getting responses. Hands are being raised. Make sure that you can hear me and you can see my screen. Okay, great, 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 great. We will be starting in exactly 8 minutes. All right, I see a couple more people joining. As you join, please raise your hand. I want to make sure that you can hear me and see my screen. Please raise your hand if you can hear me and see my screen. Okay, awesome. Oh, Lord. Dun, 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 dun. I have to respond. Looks like some folks are having a hard time getting up. I need to respond to an email real quick, so I'm just going to shut my screen off. I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. Okay, welcome to AMA LTL. If you're just joining us, my name is Maria Suleiman. I will be the presenter today. We're going to be talking about transitioning from manager to leader. If you are new to AMA LTLs, this is a lunchtime learning series that we do twice a month on a variety of topics to help you improve professionally. Um, we offer a ton of trainings, so workforce trainings, leadership development trainings. And the feedback we're getting from a lot of our customers is your training events are so great, your training program is so great. But what happens when I go back into the weeds of doing my day-to-day activities for my job? And so we found that there was a gap in terms of bite-size learning events that can just help people continue their learning on a variety of topics to help them build their competencies. And so we started doing the webinars 3 months ago. We have people who join us from different federal organizations like federally employed women, Blacks in government. We also have an audience of small businesses that join us from the Small Business Development Center. I used to do a ton of trainings. I still do on occasion on a variety of business and leadership topics. And so the webinar is also posted on their calendar. So we have a nice mix of attendees. Just a quick background before we get started for those who are early today and joining us for the first time. I will be starting officially in 2 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and put my bio now on the screen. I'm not going to read it, just for your information. I'll come back to that, but for your information, I'm an executive coach and organizational development consultant by trade. I'm also the managing director and owner of AMA Consulting. I'll share a little bit about what we do when we officially start in 1 minute. Okay, we have a couple more people who just joined. If you're just joining the webinar, please make sure that you can hear me and see my screen. Raise your hand just so that we know that everything is still okay with our connection. Turn off this heater here, it's super loud. All right, we are going to go ahead and get started. For those of you who are just joining, my name is Maria Suleiman. I'll be your presenter today. I have my bio up here, but just key things I'm going to pick out. I am an executive coach and an organizational development consultant for 18 years. I started my career in academia and then went to work for the government. So I'm a former Fed, and I left the government 8 years ago and started my business supporting federal agencies. So I'm the managing director of AMA Consulting. I'll just share a little bit about what we do. So we support agencies in three primary areas: organizational development, that's where we do a ton of the training. We do strategy work and workforce support, business transformation services. We do support programs, do change management projects, and then IT support, specifically in the accessibility space. So we do Section 508, 504 compliance, web accessibility, and RPA implementation. So RPA is new and buzzing in the federal government. And so we support RPA implementation in terms of providing and forecasting jobs of the future for federal workers who are going to be impacted by automation. I'm actually going to be speaking at the FEW conference in the summer on the impact of RPA on the federal workforce. I think that that's something that a lot of people don't have on their radar, but really should be on your radar, because automation is here. It's not coming, it's already here, and it's going to impact the work that you do, whether directly or indirectly. So I talked about my background already. I'm going to jump right into it. The LTLs are bite-sized learning. So we only have 30 minutes, and I want to try to give you as much content as possible. And at the same time, I want it to be interactive. So if you have questions, comments, please feel free to drop them in the question box. Periodically, I'm going to look in there and make sure that I answer your questions and bring your comments up for discussion. I will not unmute anyone because we have almost 100 people on the webinar today. So it's a large group and we have a short amount of time. So I want to keep the flow orderly. But if you have any questions, comments, please put it in the questions box and I will come back. So somebody is saying they cannot hear me. Can everybody hear me or is it just one person? I just got that from Claudia saying you can't hear me. So can everybody hear me? Because it's saying on my end that people can hear me. Can you please just type yes in the questions box if you can hear me? I want to make sure everybody can hear me. Okay, so I'm getting a lot of yeses. So Claudia, maybe your mic, maybe your volume is turned off, okay? All right, so check that out. All right, we'll jump right into it. So very quickly, I want to do some brief definitions. What I found is as an instructor and a facilitator, we make assumptions about what we think people know about different topics and different subject areas. It's just better to be clear. I know people use these words management and leadership interchangeably, but they're not exactly the same thing. They correlate, they flow into one another. So you're sometimes can be a manager and a leader at the same time, or most times can be a manager and a leader at the same time, but they're not exactly the same thing. So I just want to do a brief definition to draw out a distinction there. So management is the coordination and execution of activities in order to achieve a stated objective, okay? While leadership is using social influence to maximize the effort of others towards a goal or a stated objective. So there are some similarities between management and leadership in the sense that you are leading an effort, right, as a manager and as a leader. But there are some very clear distinctions. Another way that management and leadership are similar is that you're, as a manager and as a leader, you're working towards a stated objective. You're working towards a goal. Another quick thing I wanted to say about leadership and management is that sometimes we conflict leadership and management with a position, with a title, or with domain expertise, but they're not necessarily the same thing. So all of those things can be encompassed in what a leader does and who a leader is. So yes, your title, your domain expertise, your position, that all ties into who you are as a leader, but that's not the essence of leadership. Okay, so I just want to say that up front. And also, when we talk about management, management is more about managing activities, while leadership is about using social influence to move people towards a goal. Okay, so let's delve a little deeper into the distinctions here. What do managers do versus what do leaders do? Okay, so here I have a table and I want you to think about it in context of what you do at your agency, or if you're a business owner or you work in a corporation. Think about it in context of what you do and also what your leaders or your supervisors do. It will help you better understand the difference or the distinction between a manager and a leader. So managers focus on activities and tasks, while leaders focus on people. Okay, what is an example of that? If you're managing a project and you're a project manager, you're focused on the deliverables. You're focused on achieving your deliverables within a set timeline. You are managing, but you're also a leader in that project because you're also working with your team to get the project done. So you wear dual hats. You understand the management component, but there's also a leadership component into delivering a project on time, because you have to focus on the people aspect. So I want you to see that distinction there. Managers focus on activities and tasks, while leaders focus on people. As a manager, you can execute alone. Again, using the example of a project. So there may be a project that you're single-handedly taking from conception to the end, from cradle to grave. As a leader, you must work in teams. That is one big distinction between a manager and a leader. Again, I just want to reiterate that you can be both a manager and a leader at the same time. It's not either or, but I just want to create the distinctions because when we go to talk about how you transition from a manager to a leader, it's going to be important. So as a leader, you must work in teams. So you're not a leader if you are not influencing people. Okay, so you must work in teams. Thirdly, managers do more of organizing, because remember, the goal is to get the task done. The goal is to bring the project to delivery. The goal is to get the system deployed at a certain time. Okay, so you're organizing. A leader more focuses on inspiring, because a leader is influencing people. And so you can't organize people. It's about inspiration. It's about getting them to see the why behind a project. It's about tapping into the what's in it for them. So that's inspiration. It's painting the picture of the vision for them to where they're plugged in. Okay. So that's another distinction there. Managers direct, leaders influence. This is very, very a big thing as you think about transitioning from management to leadership. One distinction about great leaders is they don't micromanage, because they don't have to be in the nitty gritty. They've built relationships with their team, and they understand the different skills and abilities and the different things that each team member brings to the table, and they're able to use that to influence more so than directing. As a manager, especially when you're trying to get a delivery on a project, using that example again, you have to direct, you have to delegate, you have to follow through, you have to be more direct because you're hands on working on a project. But as a leader, when you're putting on that leadership hat, it's more about influence. And I would tell you, in my 18 years of working with leaders, from leaders in government, first line leaders to branch chiefs to division directors and very senior SESs, influencing is very, very hard. It's not, it's easier to micromanage. That's the default. Influencing is extremely hard, but we're going to talk about how you get there. The next point is that managers control and leaders motivate. Again, this is tied into how do you actually execute? You execute as a manager by controlling, because again, using the example of delivering on a project, your manager hat, when you're looking at your project timeline and you're seeing risk factors that may derail your project, you jump in and you try to control or mitigate that risk. That is the job of a manager. And when you are wearing that hat as a manager, that is perfectly what you need to do in that situation for you to achieve the stated objective. As a leader, the way you move things and get things done is by motivating. It's still harnessing other people's efforts. It's still steering people in a one direction, but you don't do it through control. You do it through motivation. Managers are transactional. So managers, again, it's about getting the task done. It's about what's here in front of me right now. What do I need to execute? What's my next action item? So managers, very action item, very project based, very transactional. It's about productivity. You know, how many reports are we pushing out, or how many work group sessions do we have to do to push out this product? How many trainings do we have to do? So that's being a manager. Leaders are more strategic. So when you're putting your leadership hat, you're looking, okay, so once this product deploys, how's that going to impact the team? What may that uncover? If we save time on productivity, what may we be able to use that time towards? Okay. So that's another distinction between a manager and a leader. Again, tied into that, managers are more short range thinking. So they're thinking about right now, delivery, how do we meet the target? Leaders are more long range. Leaders think about impact. Impact not just to the immediate team, impact to the customer, impact to the general public if you're working for the government, impact to the business environment. So leaders think, I like to say, the more range you have, the farther down the line you can see, the more you're into the leadership, more into the leadership side. Okay, so I'm going to pause for a little bit and then go into questions before we talk about how do you actually transition, right? So if you, most people start out and they start out by, maybe managing projects, and then they move on to be a team lead and then a supervisor. How do you actually make that transition, especially a lot of times if you have to manage and lead at the same time? How do you know when you're managing, and how do you know when you're leading? And if you want to move further up, say you're leading a business, you really have to hone your leadership skills. So how do you do that? All right. So somebody says, Esther says, hello, will a copy of the presentation be provided? We don't send out copies of the presentation, but we do post the webinars on our YouTube page. And Erica will send out the link to the YouTube page to everybody who attended so that you'll be able to access the webinar. Just see if I have more questions really quickly. Okay, so Claudia figured it out and she's on, she can hear me now, so that's great. So we don't have any other questions. If you have questions, please feel free to chime in the questions box. So now let's get into the meat of, I just wanted to lay some groundwork. Let's get into the meat of the discussion. How do you prepare for leadership? How do you make that transition from management to leadership? So the first thing that I will say in terms of leadership is that you have to be aware of the leadership competencies that you need to build. And if you think about it, the greatest leaders that you've had, so when we do our leadership development program, I do an exercise where I tell people to think about the best leader that they've had, whether it's a supervisor or just even in life personally, someone that you've looked up to, someone who has impacted you, someone who has supported you. And I say, write down the things about them that make them the best leader to you. And we do about 40, 50 training programs a year. I don't get to facilitate all of them, but the ones that I do facilitate, and I do this exercise without fail. 95% of the competencies that people put on as the thing that makes the best leader that they've had, the best leader to them, has nothing to do with technical knowledge. It has to do with leadership competencies. What does that mean? If you're a federal employee, you should know about the OPM, ECQs, the executive core qualifications. If you're looking to grow and to move up in your grade and really go into leadership, you should be aware of what those ECQs are. I'm going to touch on them a little bit. Also, within your agency, most agencies for your specific role, they may have leadership competencies that they have come up with, the things that they say are important for you to have as a leader. That's where you really need to focus if you're looking to transition into leadership. So leadership is really less about technical knowledge, because remember, as a manager, yes, you have to have the technical knowledge and you have to be an expert because you're delivering on a task. As a leader, you need to have domain knowledge, but you don't necessarily have to be an expert you don't necessarily have to be expert technically on your team, because you're harnessing the effort of others. So it really boils down to your leadership competencies. So just quickly touching on the OPM ECQs, they're grouped into 5 different ECQs. So one of them is competencies, your ability to lead change, being results driven, financial management, leading people, and building coalitions. So those are the 5 categories of competencies. And what competencies are simply a mix of your skills, abilities, and knowledge. So that competencies is what your leadership, what you're able to harness in terms of being a leader. Okay, so there are various competencies under these 5 umbrellas, and I'm not going to touch on them, but I'm just going to share some of them that are really important. And I've pulled out 3, which is self-awareness, social influence, and your leadership philosophy, that I would drill more deeply into. But I just wanted to mention some of them for you to be aware of in terms of what you need to be building as you transition into leadership. Okay, so self-awareness, some of them are under leading change, creativity and innovation, self-awareness, strategic thinking, vision, flexibility, external awareness, under results driven. Some of the competencies that you should be thinking about building is accountability, customer service, decisiveness. That's a huge one, ability to make decisions. It's a big skill that a leader needs to have. Entrepreneurship, problem solving, technical credibility, under business acumen, financial management. Again, thinking about leadership, if you're leading an entire division, you need to understand how the budget works. You need to understand, like how to advocate for funds. I was talking to a leader and she was sharing with me, she was at HHS and worked in the Office of Minority Health. And I was wondering how she was able to get money to do her programs, some of the programs that don't necessarily have a high profile nationally, but she had this amazing skill to know how to track money, to know how to advocate for the funds that she needs to execute on her programs. So that's financial management. That's a tangible example how the leadership competency of financial management can make you more effective as a leader. Human capital management, that's another competency. Technology management. Under building coalition, a competency there is partnering, political savvy, influencing and negotiating. Again, these are all skills. These are competencies that you need to have. Under leading people, conflict management, leveraging diversity, developing others, and team building. You will notice here that under these competencies, technical credibility is what is mentioned, not necessarily technical knowledge. So this is where sometimes I think that people get stuck, is when you're transitioning from a manager to a leader, you need to be able to be pulled out from the weeds. What does that mean? I'm looking for a way to say this without getting folks confused. This may be a little bit controversial. As a leader, sometimes your technical knowledge can stand in the way of you being able to build coalitions and build partners and leverage diversity. When you're so much into the weeds with your technical knowledge, it can actually work against you when you really go into building your leadership skills. I'm going to pause and take questions and comments on that because I know that was a little bit controversial, that was a mouthful. Okay, somebody says, can you repeat the 5 competencies? Yeah, sure, Brittany. So the ECQ, they're categories. So there are 5 categories. One of them is leading change, results driven, business acumen, leading people, and building coalition. So these are the 5 categories that OPM, if you're building to move up in your grade and hopefully become an SES, you have to demonstrate that you have the competencies under these 5 categories. And then I read out each of the competencies that is under each category. Okay, does that make sense? So somebody says slide is still on number 6, preparing for leadership. Yes, I didn't put slides up on each of the different competencies. So I'm just relaying that to you in our discussion. So I try to keep the slides very short so people are listening to me and not focused on the slides. Okay. Okay, so are there any planned trainings on ECQs? Okay, so that I'm gonna revert that and turn that into a request. So we are gonna be working on our webinars for April, May, and June. So maybe I'm gonna do one on just ECQs. It seems like there's a lot of interest in that. So I may do a webinar on just diving a little deeper into the ECQs. But our discussion today was talking about how you transition from management to leadership. I didn't want to go too much into the weeds there. Okay, but I can put that as a request. I see a lot of people asking about me repeating the ECQs, and then I see a formal request here about planned training on ECQ. So we can make that one of our webinar topics. Okay, all right, so I'm going to go back. So we're still on point number 1, building your leadership competencies, right? And that's how we went into ECQs. But beyond the ECQs, look within your agency, look in your talent management division, even talk to your boss or your director to see if your agency has built competencies for your particular role. So recently we did an event with senior leadership at OPQ where we actually helped them come up with specific competencies that they feel are important to the roles of their project managers. So depending on your role, some competencies may be more important for you to develop than others. So you also want to check with your leadership, you want to check with your talent management division to see if your agency has developed a competency guide for your particular role or your particular series, okay? So that's the first point, is as a leader, you want to come out of the weeds from the technical knowledge and really focus on building your leadership competencies, because That's what's really going to be important. And I know that you all have experienced this, and I've experienced this, even as a former employee, and now even with leading my own company. I had to develop, I had to realize that I don't have to be the expert all the time. You can lead the team of experts without being the expert. You do have to have technical credibility. I just want to point that out. So if you're leading a program or you've been tapped to lead a program and you don't know anything about it, take some time and learn about that program. Lead on your technical folks. You need to know enough to be dangerous. I'll put it at that. But you need to have technical credibility. You have to have domain knowledge so that as you're making decisions, as you are partnering, as you're being flexible, as you're solving problems, as you're doing the financial management or making human capital decisions, you understand the technical aspect of it and how that plays. Okay, so you can't be completely novice on the technical piece, but that's not your main focus. Your main focus is on the leadership competencies. Okay, now the second point, as you transition from being a manager to a leader, I really wanted to drill on this because this is so critical. In order for you to be a great leader, I always say to my customers and my clients, and as a coach, leadership is in three phases. It's leading yourself, it's leading people before you can lead in an organization. So you can't lead people if you're not leading yourself. And you can't lead an organization if you're not able to get people together and move them in a particular direction. So I use those three phases every time when I coach, when I develop leadership programs. We always start from self. So self-awareness is huge. It is understanding your composition, everything that makes you you. Is understanding your behavior, your patterns, your skills, your blind spots. Okay. And if you have never taken any kind of assessment and you're really looking to transition into leadership, I recommend you do. I've put some on here. Again, these are, I'm not trying to personally recommend any one of these assessments. These are just the assessments that we use when we train leaders and when we work with leaders. MBTI is the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. That is a personality assessment. And it's essentially, it's an assessment that lets you know your personality type. Okay, so that's not a trait assessment. There's a distinction there. I don't want to go into detail, but your type personality type is essentially your default. Okay, is what you lean into. Okay, and the MBTI assessment essentially evaluates how you direct and receive energy. So that's introversion versus extroversion, how you organize and receive information, sensing versus intuition, how you interact with the external world, judging versus perceiving. I'm going a little bit into detail there, but that's very important because if you don't understand yourself, so have you ever wondered, like, why do I, do things? Why am I very matter of fact? Why am I very focused on fact as opposed to focused on possibilities? That's a personality type. That is that's your default. Okay, so again, there's no right wrong, but you need to understand what your own personality type is so that you know how to interact with people and you know how to leverage your strengths and also work on your blind spots. Okay, 360-degree feedback is another type of assessment. It's a little bit different. You're not just assessing yourself, but your team assesses you. So with a 360-degree feedback, you would typically get feedback from your immediate supervisors, also from people who report to you, and also from your customers. So that's a more robust view about your communication skills, about how you work. Okay, and 360-degree assessments can be developed and customized, okay, to what it is that you're trying to target as a leader. So whether it's your communication skills, or whether it's your collaboration skills, partnering skills, or what have you, your 360-degree feedback is feedback not just from you, but from your immediate supervisors and also your direct reports and customers. There are other assessments. I can't name them all. There's the DISC. Having a couple of people not able to join. Erica, can you please work with people who are not able to join? I'm getting some emails about some people not able to join. And we'll also post the webinar on there. We have a really large group today, so it's possible that it's kicking some folks out. But there are other assessment like DISCs. So the DISC assessment is more focused on traits. There are other assessments like the Hogan assessment, there's the FIRO-B. So, but the points, let me not digress too far. The point of self-awareness is you have to know yourself. You have to know your patterns. You have to know your strengths, what you're really good at. You have to know your blind spots, the things that trip you up all the time. You have to understand the composition of your behavior. You have to know where you are, even with your competency skill level. So that self-awareness is very important. What are some steps that you can take to start to build self-awareness? One of them is self-reflection. If you don't do it, start from today. Give yourself 10 minutes to sit in quiet and just reflect. Start from reflecting on your day. So let's say you want to do it at the end of the day when you come back from work. Just sit down. It doesn't have to be, you can do it anywhere. You can do it sitting in your car. You can do it, at home. You can, if you want to do it just before you leave the office, just take some time, 10 minutes. Shut off electronics, get off your email, just sit down and begin to ask yourself questions. How was my day today? Did I set any goals for myself? Did I have a task list? Did I accomplish the things I wanted to do? Why? Was there something that happened today that bothered me? Why? Did I have a conversation? Did I have a difficult conversation today with a team member? Did I experience any setbacks? What was that about? How am I feeling? What am I motivated about? What am I excited? So that, just ask yourself these questions in that self-reflection time, and make sure you have something to capture your thoughts or what you uncover. So some people use the official term of journaling. And sometimes when you think about journaling, people think it's just writing in a book. Sometimes I do videos or I take notes on my phone during my self-reflection time. That's a quick way to start to build that self-awareness for you to really start to be in tune with yourself. What happens during that process of self-awareness is you start to uncover your patterns, you start to uncover how you do what you do, you start to uncover your strengths, you see what you are successful at, you see a blind spot, and you start to learn more about that and develop, okay? So the other thing too that you can do to build self-awareness is self-regulation. So once you are doing that reflection and you begin to identify maybe negative patterns that are standing in your way, then you can start to work to interrupt those patterns, okay? So I just want to drop those two things, self-regulation and reflection, self-regulation and self-reflection. I'm getting a little bit anxious because I'm running short on time. This happens all the time. I try to pack so much content into 30 minutes. But okay, the next point is build your social influence. Okay, if you have questions and you're willing to stay on beyond the 30 minutes, I'll hang on to answer your questions. But so I don't have to feel pressured. The next point is build your social influence. So transitioning from manager to leader. Remember one of the distinctions. Managers can work alone. You can execute a project. As a leader, you cannot work in silos. And this is why sometimes you see some people in an organization. They may not be the smartest in the room. They may not be they may not have that technical knowledge. They may not even particularly be very nice and polite, but you see them get ahead because they have built relationships throughout the organization. They have social influence. So build your social influence. Learn about what's going on outside your immediate team. Learn about changes that are coming up. Know who are the key decision makers. And FYI, a key decision maker may not necessarily correlate with your title. What do I mean? When I started a business, I learned very quickly that the executive assistants are key decision makers. Why? Because they can get me onto the director's calendar or not. So once I learned that, I developed relationships with them. When I would come in and meet with the director, I would stop by and make sure I got to know who they were. I would stop by and make sure that I supported them. I would stop by and form a relationship with them. So when I'm trying to get on the director's calendar, it's not hard for me to get that meeting because I have a relationship with his EA. So these are the things that can help you build your social influence. Social influence is huge because that is the currency from which you do leadership transactions. It's not by control. And I'm telling you, as a leader, if you've been so focused on control, you can only control people so far. The minute they find a better opportunity, the minute they find another option, the minute you can execute because you're diminished in some capacity or the other, your control is going to go to no use. But social influence, that currency will keep appreciating. This is where you as a leader, you have so much social influence that even when you mess up, your people are still behind you because you've taken the time to build that, and it's through relationships. Last but not least is you have to develop your own leadership philosophy. When I work with leaders in our leadership development program, I always tell them this is an exercise, another exercise that we do. Your leadership philosophy is, again, knowing who you are as a leader, what are the core three main values that are important to you, and what people should expect when they interact with you as a leader. You set the pace for how people interact with you. You set the pace for how your direct reports interact with you, for how your customers interact with you. You have to be clear on what your leadership philosophy is. So for me, as a leader of my organization, my values are on the wall when you come into our headquarters office. The four most important things that I esteem is: number one, excellence; diligence; integrity; and compassion. Everybody who knows me, like I say it all the time when we have meetings. So everybody who works with me and works for me knows that is my leadership philosophy. That is how I operate at the office. That's how I operate at home. That is who I am. So develop your own leadership philosophy, because then it will set the pace for how people should interact with you. So I'm going to go ahead and stop here. This is the end of the content for the webinar. I do want to encourage you to please follow us on social media: Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Erica on the chat is going to post our upcoming webinars. Like I said, we're working on the schedule. So we have the schedule for February and in March, and we're going to work on the schedule for April, May, and June. So definitely ECQs is going to be one of the topics that we talk about, because that was a request made here today. But I did want to give time for questions. I want to hear from you. Please give me your questions and comments. I had to speed through a lot of the content, but I do want to hear from you. So I'm going to stop right now and look out for questions. Okay, so another comment on ECQs. So Nancy says a training on ECQs would be great. All right, point well taken. ECQs will definitely be one of the upcoming webinars. Are there sites you recommend to work on developing your philosophy? So there's actually a book, and hold on, let me. The name of the book just left my head right now, but it's if you email me info@ama consult.com, I will send you the name of that book, and it's I can't remember the name right now, but if you email me, I'll send you the name of that book, and it will help you with developing your own leadership philosophy. Okay, it will be a guide. But you see, this is not something that a lot of people talk about. So there's really no content or website where you can go and say, okay, here's how you develop your leadership philosophy. But it starts from that self-awareness, and also doing those assessments, MBTIs, because then, you always know the things that you like, you always know the things that tick you off. But until you really do the self-reflection and you do the assessment, then it becomes more grounded for you, it becomes more concrete, and then you can use that to develop your leadership philosophy. Okay. How do you have any recommendations on how to improve your decision making? Maria, yeah, so that's a big one. Decision making comes from experience, and actually a big part of that, it comes from making mistakes. So if you're one of those people who's scared to make decisions because you don't want to make mistakes, then you're actually stopping yourself from making decisions, because the only way that you know what is a good decision or not a good decision is actually by doing it. And it takes building courage. And that also is linked to self-awareness. I'm telling you, once you get it down in terms of understanding yourself and leading yourself, you're more confident on the ground that you stand on. even so that when you do make a mistake, it's not a huge, you don't beat yourself up so much, you learn from it and you're able to make sharper decisions. There's also a webinar that we've done in the past on using the decision matrix to make decisions. So there's a formal methodology that you can learn on making decisions. And if you email me, I can share that decision matrix with you where you consider several factors and you actually rate the factors and you score the factors before you make the decisions. That's more analytical decision making. But when you talk about making a decision as a leader, a lot of it is going to be gut instinct based on experience and also your competencies. And that comes from having courage. It comes from making a decision and it doesn't work out and you learn, or making a decision and it works out and you learn that is the right way to keep going. But you can also learn this methodology to help you get started. The manager and leader can be interchangeable based on tasks. Do you agree? Absolutely, yes. So like I said, a lot of times you're a manager and a leader at the same time. The key is knowing when you're wearing what hat. You need to understand when you need to slip into the management role. If it's a task, something needs to be executed. You can't be trying to inspire and motivate people when the deadline is tomorrow. You have to jump in and control. When it's something that's more programmatic, that involves others, that's going to have a broader range, a more long-lasting impact, you can't just jump in and control. You want to take the time to inspire and motivate. You want to learn. You want to see where the resistance is. You want to bridge gaps. You want to present the why behind the decision. So there's a certain nuance there to how you navigate back and forth between manager and leader. And just because you're transitioning from manager to leader doesn't mean you will never manage. As a matter of fact, that is a blind spot for some leaders. Some leaders are so high up there, so visionary, so forward thinking. And yes, they have a team of managers, but you still have to manage because you can be so high up there that you're disconnected from the day-to-day on ground. I hope that was helpful. How do you get through to leadership colleagues who don't seem to have a leadership philosophy? You ask them directly, like, what is important to you? You know, what is, I mean, everything is can be urgent, but not everything is important. What is most important to you? So, you know, as a leader, there's so many things I'm flexible on, but I have non-negotiables. Excellence. Like, there's no, if you're not going to do something to the utmost of your ability, then don't do it. Just don't do it. You know, so excellence, that's it. Anything worth doing is worth doing well. Diligence, keep sharpening your skill. We are a continuous learning organization. And when we go in and we work with agencies, we tell them you have to build a culture of continuous learning. You have to keep sharpening your skills. Things are changing every day. So you have to be diligent. That's diligence. It's constant, earnest effort. You can't be, oh, you know, now the program works, so all fine. No, you have to make room for continuous improvements. Integrity, your word is all you have, you know, so like you always have to do the right thing and keep your word. And compassion, you have to care. You can't, you know, you have to care about the cause. You have to care about your people. You have to care about the work. If you don't care, you don't have that passion, then you should go into, you should get into another business. Okay, so you ask them. That's how you, if they don't have a leadership philosophy, you don't say like, what is your leadership philosophy? You ask yours, like, what is important to you? What is the biggest thing that's a non-negotiable for you? You'll be surprised that they probably hadn't thought about it, but they start to tell you, and you can gather a lot of information from that. Book recommendation or possible future webinar topic. Okay, so another future webinar topic on leadership philosophy. Okay, so we actually work through this when we do our leadership development program. We walk through an exercise where we help people develop their leadership philosophy, and they actually present it at the end of the program. We can touch on that, but it's not something that you can just learn in one webinar. So I can touch on that and create some content around that, but I just want to put that out there. We can talk about why it's important, what all it should include, but it's a long-term process before you finally get there. Do you have any guidance on balanced development of self-awareness and technical skills? Oh, I think it just depends on the nature of work that you do. So for example, we train a lot of acquisition professionals at GSA. with acquisition, everything is so regulated and it's all based on the law. You can't fake that. It's either you know it or you don't know it. It's either you know what the FAR says or you don't know what the FAR says. So it depends on your role. Same thing with things like project management. It's either you know it or you don't know it. But if it's program support work where it's not heavily regulated and it's not that deep, then you have more latitude to focus more on leadership skills. So, for example, if you're leading a team of contracting officers, you should have gotten to that level 3 cert. So you are an expert, not just on being a leader, but expert on the acquisition law and acquisition procedure. So it depends on the line of work that you're in. Some roles are more flexible than others. All right, I'm getting a lot of thank yous. You're welcome. Thank you, guys. It gives me joy to actually do these webinars. You can tell that I talk a lot. I'm a teacher at heart, and I'm very passionate about leadership topics because I think that a lack of leadership is a cause of a lot of the chaos that we experience in organizations. And it's really not a technical issue. It's a lack of leadership competency. So I am very passionate when I talk about this subject. You are welcome. You are welcome. You are welcome. I'm getting a lot of thank yous. I believe I've gone through all the questions. Somebody says this was great. I am glad that I added value in just 30 minutes. We aim to please here. So I'm glad to get all this feedback. All right, guys, I'm going to be signing out in about 30 seconds. If you, oh my Lord, it's 12:43. So we've gone almost 15 minutes past. If you have any questions, this is your last chance to ask them. You are welcome, Angela. You are welcome, Paul. Thank you, guys. Well, you're welcome, Vanessa. Thank you for joining. Any other questions? All right, I'm going to go ahead and sign out, and hopefully I'll hear from some of you via email. You're welcome, Esther. I'll hear from some of you via email, and I will connect with you again on another AMA LTL. Have a great Wednesday and a great week.